and I'd say just honest, brutally honest with what he thinks, how he feels about you, how he feels about the program, how he feels about opponents. And, I think ultimately that is something that really attracts him to kids today, to recruits, because they see he's kind of speaks their language, and he's upfront and honest with them. He's not BSing them. And you see some coaches who will say and do anything to win a recruit over. I think Dan, for the most part, is pretty honest with the recruit and telling him what his future is with the program, how he envisions him playing with UConn. And so I think his honesty in that sense is a good trait that's helped him on the recruiting path as well.
He is the author of Hurley's Heroes, UConn's Return to College Basketball's Elite. We have the pleasure in welcoming David Borges onto Hoopsology. Welcome, David.
How you doing? Good to be here, Justin.
Thanks for coming on to the show. We always take an interest in interviewing authors that cover the world of basketball. So when looking at your book, we took a particular interest into it. So we start at the origin story in terms of just the formation of the idea for the book. So could you elaborate in terms of how you got the idea, the planning process, and how they came to fruition?
Yeah, well, I cover the UConn men's basketball team for Hearst, Connecticut Media, CT Insider, and which basically is a bunch of different websites and newspapers in Connecticut. And I travel to every road game and get to just about every home game, and so I've been doing that for about 17 years now, as well as all of Dan Hurley's tenure here so far. And so they won the 2 back-to-back championships, which is incredible. And then last year they were on the verge of trying to win a third, and I thought that whole journey would make a great book, looking at the 2 title runs and then looking at going through the run for history to become just the second team to win 3 in a row. At some point, the publisher decided they just wanted to really just stick to kind of like the 7 years of Dan Hurley and how he's turned the program around. So the book is about everything from 2018 to the present in terms of UConn's history and since Dan Hurley took over. But the main gist of it is about the 2 championship seasons of 2023 and 2024, and last year's journey towards a 3rd title, which ultimately came up short, but in a lot of ways was just as interesting and entertaining because of all the what an exhausting and lots of pitfalls throughout the whole season. So in a way, last year's story is almost as interesting as the 2 title runs.
Can you discuss with Dan Hurley just his mindset in rebuilding UConn, such a rich history, but yet in turmoil when he came there, just kind of his philosophy in just rebuilding UConn quickly into a perennial power once again?
Yeah, it really wasn't a bad spot. And when he came in fact, it was even in worse conditions sort of than what he was led to believe when he took the job. And he had a blueprint that had worked at the University of Rhode Island. It was going to take some years, going to take a few years. It was basically a 6-year blueprint where he was going to, they were going to gradually get better. They were going to start recruiting better. They're going to start looking better on the floor, getting better talent, competing in games, losing tight games, and then turn that into winning close games and turning that into dominating. And he had a blueprint, and it worked. Like I said, it was a 6-year thing at Rhode Island that got them to the NCAA tournament 2 years in a row for the first time in a long time in that program's history. And it worked here at UConn. In fact, it worked even quicker than expected because by year 5 they were winning the first of their consecutive national titles. So, he stuck to it. He didn't deviate from it all. He knew the first year or 2 were going to be difficult, and they were, but it all pretty much played out as according to plan, and now they're one of the best programs, if not the premier program in the country right now.
Can you talk about his personality? I think he's one of the most unique characters in all of sports. What are kind of some things about him that, like, the public, they have their own preconceived notions, but you cover this team on a regular basis that people should be aware of in terms of how he makes his team successful?
Yeah, I think one good way to describe him would be just someone who's very brutally honest with himself, with his emotions, with what he says and what he does. he can admit when he's made mistakes. And last year in particular, he made quite a few in terms of his sideline behavior and some of the things he said to opposing fans and referees. And so I think he's very intelligent. He's street smart, but also book smart. He's from Jersey City. His dad was a probation officer, so he came from a blue collar background. But he's also a smart guy, a very intelligent well-read person. And I'd say just honest, brutally honest with what he thinks, how he feels about you, how he feels about the program, how he feels about opponents. And, I think ultimately that is something that really attracts him to kids today, to recruits, because they see he kind of speaks their language, and he's upfront and honest with them. He's not BSing them. And you see some coaches who will say and do anything to win a recruit over. I think Dan, for the most part, is pretty honest with the recruit and telling him what his future is with the program, how he envisions him playing with UConn. And so I think his honesty is in that sense is a good trait that's helped him on the recruiting path as well.
So how does he handle that brutal honesty with just the environment of college sports right now with NIL and a transfer portal in terms of talking to a recruit? I can imagine his frustration in what's going on, or do you think he has embraced NIL in terms of recruiting just new players to his team?
Well, he understands it's here and it's here to stay. I think, like most people involved in college sports, I think he agrees that the players do deserve compensation. I think for a long time they were it was kind of an imbalanced system, unfair to them, and I do think he probably thinks it swung a little bit too far in the wrong direction. It's getting a little crazy and out of hand. In fact, he often says that. But the thing about NIL and the portal with him is that what it really does is it kind of weeds out the kids that he probably wouldn't want in the program anyway. Not talent-wise, certainly, but there's going to be some kids who are great talents who are really just in school for a year and trying to position themselves for the NBA draft and want to make as much money as possible in their 1 year at college. I think he's taking in guys who are he tries to take in guys who will buy into the team concept, do what the program needs to be successful, and ultimately that will help them in the NBA draft. He's had a great track record of developing guys, but he wants guys who are team oriented, who aren't just looking for sort of a payday. So in that sense, in a way, NIL kind of helps him, like I said, filter out some of the players who may be certainly talented enough to play there, but maybe not have the best attitude, and he ends up getting really good kids who are also very good players.
So, in terms of filtering out the players that he particularly wants, is there? I can imagine there's still friction in terms of what happens during the season. So, how does he balance that in terms of being brutally honest, but also not destroying their confidence either over the course of a season? How does he kind of balance that?
Yeah, I think it's about constant communication. It's about, if I yelled at you today, maybe the next morning he'll talk to him and tell him why he did that and why he thinks it's going to help him out. I'm not privy to being at practices or in the locker room during games, but I really believe that the kids he's had on his team, by and large, particularly the kids he recruited, and most of the kids he even inherited from Kevin Ollie, the previous administration, if you will. I really do believe that they're the types of kids who can deal with criticism. I don't think he's tough in practices. Again, I'm not there, but I think during games he's not as tough on them. He's more tough on the refs. But I think he's their friend during games, and I think in practices, I think ultimately what these kids realize, and again, he's recruiting good kids who have good work ethics, who understand this kind and want to get better and want to develop. I think these kids generally realize that, yes, he might be yelling at me right now, but that he truly does love me, and he truly does want me to be better and improve and be the best I can, and ultimately be hopefully an NBA player. So I think that's how he makes it work. And again, the fact that he's so honest and upfront with them helps out with that understanding process as well.
Were there any stories through your research that surprised you that we had preconceived notions of going into the book, but throughout the course of putting it together, that surprised you either positively or negatively in terms of your perception of Hurley or just UConn basketball overall?
Well, it's funny you say research. I mean, I basically just wrote off my experience covering the team for the past 7 years in particular. So honestly, it was more just kind of writing what I saw and what I know and a lot of what I've written about, but some stuff that a little bit more behind the scenes stuff that I wanted to give readers a little bit of a glimpse into some behind the scenes, the way Dan deals with me. For one, there's a couple interactions we've had over the years that I wrote about. One of them wasn't very positive. He was very happy with me, and I admitted I was wrong, and we cleared things up. And so it's not so much that I found things that surprised me, because I think I have a pretty good grasp on who Dan Hurley is at this point. But really, I think more it might be just some of the stuff that I wrote about might surprise other readers because it's stuff that they haven't read about before.
So, how do you balance that relationship with a coach? Because you need access, and certainly, you're spending a lot of time with them covering the team. However, there needs to be that boundary for just fans that may not understand, especially in this day and age, in terms of how journalism has changed. Can you explain just your role in terms of just covering this team over in time and how integral that is in terms of just bringing that coverage, especially in 2025 these days, especially in the age of social media and this hot takes?
Yeah, exactly. And this age of people who aren't actually sports writers, who are sometimes even getting credentialed to games or in blogging, or do people still blog? I guess they do. Or podcasting. Nothing wrong with podcasts, but and of course, obviously, just the social media critics and people with giving everybody a voice, which is fine, which is great. I like X, but it's not always. It's kind of a toxic place sometimes. But no, you bring up a great point. That balance you have to reach with Hurley and his coaching staff, because yes, you have to have a good relationship. You don't want him to freeze you out, and that has happened to me once or twice, briefly. So you have to balance that with being as honest about the program and about how things are going as you can. And I really believe I've tried to do that. He hasn't always agreed with stuff I've written. He hasn't always agreed with things I've done. But by and large, I think he respects writers who work hard and who are honest and give honest opinions, or just an honest day's work, if you will. And so ultimately, it's worked out pretty well, because there is that give and take, and you want to be in on certain information as well that you can get sometimes from Hurley and his staff. So by and large, it's the funny thing is, I don't know, I'm sure he hasn't read the book or seen it yet, but I know that he's requested a copy. So I think he's interested in seeing exactly what I wrote. And obviously I put myself in the position where if he's upset about things I wrote, that's going to be injurious to our relationship. But I believe that what I wrote was honest and what I saw, and again, rightfully so, kind of like 80-95% positive, because how can you be negative about what he's done with this program and winning 2 national titles,
So, can you discuss covering him that big period where he was testing out the waters with the Lakers? Such a huge story, but he decides to remain at UConn. Just kind of what was the temperature around the program at that time, and how serious was he in terms of actually, moving on to the NBA?
Well, I think he felt he owed it to himself to explore it. He has said in the past that someday he'd like to coach in the NBA, although since over the past couple of years, he's kind of rescinded that and basically said he's a college coach. This is where he belongs. This is where he wants to be. But I think he owed it to himself to look into, it's the LA Lakers, and obviously it was going to be could be a life-altering payday as well, more money than he'd make at UConn or any college program. But I really do believe that it's not. I don't think, and the people around the program felt this way too, that it almost certainly wasn't going to happen. There were, for a lot of different reasons. He's an East Coast guy. He loves being the king of the castle, if you will. He decides everything: who he recruits, who he brings in, who he hires as assistants, when practice is, and all that kind of stuff. So, the schedule, everything. And the NBA, especially the Lakers, where there's so much scrutiny, and obviously, in the NBA is a players' league, and certainly with the Lakers, you have LeBron, and I think people realize that he kind of wields some power there. So it's I don't think anyone actually truly thought he was going to take the job, but I think he owed it to himself to at least explore it. And I don't think the reason he did it was to also to extract a better contract from UConn, but ultimately that is what happened. He got a renegotiated deal and more money.
So when readers finish your book, what was the lasting impression that you want in terms of how they perceive Dan Hurley overall?
Yeah, I would just say perceive him the way you'd like to. I think UConn fans, I don't think it's going to turn UConn fans against him in any way. This book, I think it shows maybe a side of him that they haven't seen, and I think a generally positive sign. I just think, choose your own the way you want to view him. But I think I just want readers to realize that everything I wrote was honestly what I saw, what I feel. I mean, there's not a lot of opinion in there, but I think obviously I can write stuff that might come across as negative or positive, and I think it's mostly positive. So I would just say that I would hope readers understand that it's an honest take on someone who's been there throughout the whole journey and been at every game, been to all the good games and the bad times, and wrote as honest a book as I possibly could.
And David, final question. Can't let you go without maybe getting a preview of the upcoming season for UConn. What are your expectations for their team? Is it pretty high in terms of a deep run come March?
It is. I really do believe that they are one of the best teams in the country. It's not homerism. It's simply just looking at the roster, the retention they have in terms of returning scoring. I think about 60% of their scoring is back. They brought in two really good point guards which was a position of need for them. A couple of really McDonald's All-American freshmen who are going to contribute. They're banged up a little right now. A couple of guys are injured, but they're too deep at every position. They have 5-6 guys who I think could average in double figures. They have several guys who are going to be on the NBA draft radar all season. I pick, I'm an AP top 25 voter. I have them number 2 in the country right now. I have Purdue number 1 because of their returning talent. But I do believe if UConn can stay healthy, and even if they have the depth where they can survive some injuries as well. But if they're healthy come March, they're going to be right there, man. I think it's not out of the realm for a third national title in 4 years.
Well, I'm not surprised. Just the way that Hurley has built this program, truly impressive. David, thank you very much for spending the time. Truly appreciate it. Can you let our audience know where they can find your work, where they can find the book, if you're located on social media? You have any upcoming projects in the future as well?
Yeah, well, my work is on ctinsider.com, as well as newhavenregister.com, and I won't list all the different newspapers and sites, but CT Insider is the general place where you can get my UConn coverage. Almost daily throughout the season, I'll have stories and pieces on the team and players and the coaches. Obviously throughout the season, I'll be busy covering the team, traveling, and writing a lot. But I will maybe we'll meet up again in March, because there is actually another book that I've just about completed. It's more of a coffee table pictorial type book of their UConn's history that may be out in March, or if not, it may be out later than that. But but that's pretty much done. So I'm not going to be working on it too much. But that's something that I suppose you could look forward to, and hopefully within the next 6 months or so.
Yeah, that'll be on our radar for sure. David, thank you very much for joining us. Truly appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Justin. Good talking to you.